This is ACOFAE. Laura Marie and Jessica Marie proudly present A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, a podcast. Fair warning, everything the hosts say is explicit, full of spoilers and adult content and shall not be used against them. They have opinions. Let's try not to drag anyone for expressing themselves and just have fun for an hour. We all deserve it.
This episode contains spoilers from series including The Vampire Diaries, Shatter, The Folk of the Air, Acotar, Scythe, Shadowhunters, and Throne of Glass, as well as topics including sexual assault, violence, and discussions surrounding suicide.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, your weekly deep dive into the YA literature and fandoms that we love. I'm Laura Marie.
And I'm Jessica Marie.
And today we are discussing morally gray characters. They're not the villain. They're not the good guy. They're kind of in the middle, and we really like them.
They're also the hottest.
No doubt they are the hottest, rivaling only the villain, although the way these definitions kind of are, they, could be one and the same.
Azrael's also really hot, and he's not. Well, we don't know yet. We don't know. I guess you're... Oh,
don't make assumptions.
I guess you're right. We're just assuming on like 4 lines for the last X amount of years. I think it would be a good way to start off this episode that I heard this quote, like this audio on TikTok, and I'm just going to say the quote because I don't know if we could legally play it. But the quote / audio is, I always wondered why I like the villains more. And I think it might be because when they get on the floor on their knees for her and only her, something in me stirs. A hero would sacrifice her to save the world, showing they are indeed pure-hearted and honest. But a villain would tear the world apart if she was hurt, and that is a promise. They seem selfish, manipulative, and rude to everyone around, but treats her like a queen, his and only his, sitting beside him on a throne with her crown. I think villains are misjudged, and that most of the time we don't get to see their story, for if we knew it, the hero may not seem so full of glory. Monsters are made, not born, and any soul tortured. Confused and abused, incidentally, would not have time to mourn. So the next time I defend the villain of the tale, remember that they too were once broken and frail. And I think that is pretty accurate for the villain, but I also think in regards to this episode, it could be applied to morally gray characters. And I know we've discussed on our previous episode regarding villains is that villain, morally gray, anti-hero, a lot of these titles are kind of used interchangeably, not realizing that there is kind of a difference, but we automatically label villain if it's not the protagonist.
Right. And I think a good example that really ties into the quote that you very beautifully read, by the way, very nice, is Kaz from Six of Crows. He hits all of those, right? Like Inej gets hurt and he like rips out that guy's eye and, won't let anyone touch her and would tear the world apart for her. And he has a terrible, tragic backstory. And we love him, right? We love him so much, even though he's a 17-year-old violent, traumatized virgin, and he'll stay that way for a long time. We still adore him. So, morally gray characters are kind of touchy. As you said, they get lumped in with villains. And as we mentioned, it's kind of used funny in TikTok videos too. And Jess, you mentioned this earlier when we were doing research for this episode. A lot of the stuff that came up was, like fellow content makers, like bloggers and stuff, listing off their like top 10 morally great characters. But there weren't a lot of people like going into it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I don't know. How do you feel? Like,
we wanted to kind of bring some sort of substance to this episode because I think it's so easy for us, not just you and I, but just like us collectively as fans of the morally gray character to say like, these are my favorite characters, which was a lot of what these bloggers are saying. And it was great to understand other people's perspective of who's their favorite morally gray character and why. The other thing I was finding a lot was people giving advice on how to write a morally gray character, because obviously there's a lot of writers out there and you want to hone your skills. You want to make the best version of the characters that you have created in your mind as possible. So I don't want to say there was frustration, but how do you dive into this topic when we so often approach it at a very surface level and swoon worthy level? Like, obviously collectively, I was thinking of the book talk creator, Latiera Reads. She's been doing this amazing, phenomenal job reading everybody's book confessions of what we want these characters to do to us. And very relatable. And then I take a step back. I'm like, are we collectively okay? Like, do we need to discuss this further? And that's what it is. We're all like, yes, these are our favorite characters. These are our favorite tropes. These are our favorite this. But is there something deeper?
Well, and I think there is something deeper. I think that morally gray characters are more fun to read about, and I think they're more relatable. You can't really relate to somebody that's all the way good, and society kind of judges you really badly if you relate to somebody that's all the way evil, because you don't really want to be evil. You want to be kind of in the middle. So, as you mentioned, the writing tips that are given for authors that are trying to write morally gray characters. And of course, we are not authors. This is very basic internet research. We are not, like telling you how to write. Please don't. But what's available on the internet for us is 4 points. So your morally gray character has to have a motive. They have to have a weakness. They have to have a background, and they have to make hard choices. So again, if we use Kaz Brekker from Six of Crows as an example, he has a motive, he's got a weakness, he's got a good background story, and boy, does he have to make hard choices. So I think it will be interesting if we kind of hold up the characters that are thought of to be morally gray against maybe those 4 points and against kind of our preconceived notions of what morally gray is, and kind of see what we get out of there. But, I know that you love Jude from Jude. The Cruel Prince, and I also love Jude from The Cruel Prince. Do you believe that Jude is a morally gray character?
I guess. I mean, maybe we touched on it in our villains episode, but I don't think so. But then when you break it down like this, she has motive, she has weakness. We know her background. She's constantly making hard choices. And even those hard choices, you can, as a reader, you can justify them. And that happens a lot with the characters that we're reading. I know most recently, even with the Black Witch yesterday, I would be like, oh my gosh, she's making these choices. But then she would make choices emotionally. And I would say, okay, but at the same time, I would have probably done the same. Like, and to what you said just moments before, it's realistically, we're not all inherently pure and good and great. Like, there's going to be emotions and inflections, and you're going to have frustrations and anger. Not everybody could be like, oh, that's okay, I understand. There's going to be a point in your life where it's like, you know what, when you take a step back, you might be able to understand, but when you're living visceral moments, that's not your first thought.
And there's something that I want to point out when we were also doing some research is that morally gray and morally ambiguous are kind of used interchangeably. And there was a website that both of us found very, very helpful. Jess, do you have that website available?
tvtropes.org.
They have everything on there, and they go in so deep.
Yeah, one of the things and it's stuff that you don't even think of, because I know obviously we think of, maybe it's just fresh in our heads based on TikTok and media and con life, we're doing the rewatch of the Vampire Diaries right now. So obviously Damon and Klaus are at the forefront of my mind. But then this website even brought up Mean Girls. I would have never thought Mean Girls on that list of live action morally gray characters, but they mention Katie/Caddy as the main character who becomes the mean girl herself, but she turns good again by the end of the film. But through her process, you know, she has motive to take Regina down. Her weakness is she's getting bullied and then, you know, not fitting in. You know, her background with how it started with Janice and Damien and then kind of configuring. And then she's making the hard choice in those moments of like, well, what's the right thing to do? And she obviously knows what's the wrong thing to do. I mean, it's definitely deeper than I would have. I love Mean Girls. We've gone to the Broadway. We watched it. I mean, it's quotable. It's a cult classic. But I would have never put that on the scale. So it's a good website that kind of makes you think further when you're measuring against those 4 points that Laura had listed.
Right. And so if you just kind of want to put it out there, so morally ambiguous characters are those that are not traditional heroes. As we said, they've done questionable things and they cannot completely be put in a category of right or wrong. So, Jess, we have in our notes like kind of a list of characters, and we don't want to go through all of them because that's just what all the bloggers did, and we want to be different. But there are some that I think we should speak on. So I see that Shatter Me gets brought up a lot, and I have not read Shatter Me, but Jess, you have. So do you want to speak on it?
Yeah, I've read most of Shatter Me. I don't think I read like the last book or the last novella just because I really don't want it to be over. But I kind of it's just because I love Aaron Warner so much. It was the first I did the Acotar, I did Folk of the Air, and this was my second series that I really got into. So I think there was an affinity for that too. And first book, I remember I've been listening to it. I sent you a voice memo and I said to Laura, I know he doesn't have dark hair, but this guy just showed up. And she's wondering, there's this other character. I can't remember his name because obviously, I mean, I can't say he's insignificant because he plays a role at some point. But I go, this Aaron Warner guy, I'm going to like him. And it's the first time in a book that I called it right off the back. So I was really proud of myself and I liked him and he does everything for the main character and he's damaged and he's tortured. And then when you find out more about his background and you're just like, poor baby, let me hold you. Let me give you a hug. Let me help you heal, which was not healthy that is not healthy to think that you should be the person responsible for somebody's healing. So in some way I read these books and I'm like, did I regress? I was never that person before. But yeah, he's 100% morally gray and he fights for her the whole time. It's a star-crossed lovers serendipitous thing through the reading. If you're looking for a YA it has more spice than The Black Witch and more spice than does anybody consider Shadow and Bones have spice? Because I don't.
No,
but
no spice.
It's spice for YA, but not Sarah J. Maas spice is I guess what I'll say. And it's cute and I'm here for Aaron Warner. Yeah.
Okay. So I've got one in Aaron Warner. Good to know. I
thought it was interesting for the list that you found that said Joe Goldberg was considered morally gray because I have watched I haven't read the books and I would love to hear somebody's defense on thinking that he's morally gray. He's bad. He's like, he is bad. He's a killer. He's a serial killer. And there's nothing, I don't think that there's anything that justifies it except that he's a stalker. So he kills anybody who gets in the way of his relationship in his stalker mind with this fake relationship turned real because he's a stalker. And it goes on for 2 seasons so far. They're in the 3rd. And all I could think of is Dan Humphrey went off the deep end when him and Serena got a divorce. Like that's my takeaway.
So, Jess, you say that Joe, I haven't watched you, although I love Sarah Gamble. Shout out to Supernatural and the Magicians. But you say that Joe is a serial killer. Well, we all have our comfort serial killer. And, Jude technically could be considered a serial killer. Batman doesn't go out of his way to straight up murder people. But does it count when you leave like hundreds of henchmen like crippled or like brain dead? Or do you know what I mean? Like, okay, they're not technically like dead. You haven't murdered them, but they're in the hospital for the rest of their lives or they can't walk. Like, okay, so
torture. Are you saying like torture is involved?
I'm just saying that Batman is a vigilante, and I know that the argument about vigilantes happens in all of the vigilante movies and shows. They have that like politic, situation. But when we're talking about them in morally gray and looking at them through that filter, how do you feel about Batman? Does he stack up to what we have listed?
He has a tragic backstory. We know he saw his parents get murdered. In what I've seen from Batman, I feel like he has a right. I know it's weird to say right. Right's not the proper word. I don't blame him because at the same time, he's doing it for the greater good. I don't, because it's not about him. Like, he gains nothing from this. He's keeping others safe. And I feel like you can speak more to Batman, where I'm more familiar with Oliver Queen and Arrow. It's the same thing. They're both billionaire playboys who've gone through something tragic. And now it's about doing something for the greater good because the government can't get involved, or people get literally get away with murder. And if you want to bring that, you could think of Gerard Butler in Law Abiding Citizen, or
The Punisher.
Perfect. Yes. So you understand, if there was a vigilante out and there's, pedophiles on the street who get left out of prison, or murderers, and they, it's weird to think, would I be okay with that in a present day realistic context? And part of me is like, well, somebody had to. I think of that one prisoner, and this is a real story. There was a guy in prison. They were in, there was people obviously in jail, and this one guy was a pedophile and was let in with general population. And this guy who was in jail, he was already, he was in there for life. So he killed the pedophile in jail, and people were like, well, and he said, he goes, I have no remorse. You don't do that to somebody. Somebody had to do it. And I was already in here for life. So here you go. So it's weird in a weird way that was a real life vigilante. And I'll tell you what, he had, I guess, like whatever Kickstarter funds people were donating to his cause. He was getting all the money in jail because of it. And it's weird because we're so used to talking about this stuff in a fictional context with shows that we're watching or reading. How does it translate into real life?
A really good example, kind of to branch off of that, is from a book series that, Jess, I know you haven't read, but it's Scythe. And so I'm talking about Rowan from Scythe, and the book series is really it's a difficult concept to stomach, but I think once you get past that, there's I think 3 books in the series. I was able to read 2. I haven't read the 3rd book just because I know where it's going and I just don't want to deal with it.
What's it about? Because I've only seen the cover and it looks like the Ripper.
There was a war, and after the war, everybody on Earth decided that they were no longer able to make like So they created like a supercomputer cloud. The cloud is what it's called, the Thunderhead, that like governs them, that governs the whole world, and like and it cured disease, and it fixed the planet, and it controlled the population and gives jobs, and nobody's hungry. It like solved everything, but people don't die naturally. And to fix that, there's a Scythedom, which is a collection of people that go out to kill people. They're government sanctioned, and they're basically like untouchable. They can do whatever they want. They're like celebrities. And they have to like meet a quota, and they go around and murder people, and then they have like conventions, and they get together and talk about like but they have to do it like ethically, and they're bound by like a lot of ethics. And so the reason why Rowan is a morally gray character is that Rowan realizes that the Scythedom is very corrupt, and that there's a coup inside the Scythedom, and they come after him, and then he takes over as spoiler, as Scythe Lucifer, which is a fantastic name, and goes around and starts murdering all of the corrupt sides because nobody else will do it. So same kind of deal.
Yeah, because then if the Scythes are killing people, who's killing the Scythes?
Nobody. You can't kill a Scythe. The only way a Scythe can die is if they call it, if they reap themselves.
Yeah, but then, but how do you gain? Is there only a certain allotted amount of scythes?
Yes.
Because then it's like if you were born / created by the cloud, you don't grow up and say, I want to be a scythe. And then you get taken into the Scythedom.
No, you're chosen. You're recruited into the Scythedom. The Scythedom and like society exist separate.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's really interesting. It's a fantastic concept. And yeah, it's really good. And like the size, you choose your own name, and you choose your own like robes, and you choose the way that you murder people, and it has to meet like these specific like it's really good. It's a really interesting concept. I just didn't get to the third book. I won't. But first two are pretty good.
To piggyback off of that, I think Rhys could be considered, we obviously know he's morally gray in the first Acotar book. And then as the reader, we learn he's not really as morally gray as we think when we get to ACOFAE. However, all of the characters outside of Valaris still see him as the morally gray character / villain. I mean, basically all the way till after the meeting with the High Lords.
So what would you classify Rhys as?
My husband.
Aw.
I know.
That was so sweet. You're like, he's my husband. Aw. Is he your villain husband? Is he your anti-hero husband?
He could be my everything, honestly. I wouldn't even care.
Doesn't matter.
He could be the villain, and I'd be like, hi, honey, how was your day?
I want to talk about Shadowhunters, and Jess, yes. I know you haven't read it, but I fucking love Shadowhunters. And yeah, I know Cassie Clare. I know all about it. The original series isn't my favorite, so let's not talk about it. I am talking about, what is it? I'm talking about The Dark Artifices, which is different. The Dark Artifices, talking about morally gray characters. You have to mention Julian. Julian is absolutely the definition of a morally gray character. You go back to our 4 points. He has motive, he has weakness, he has background, and oh my God, does he make hard choices. Julian murders his father because his father is possessed. And it's terrible. He murders him in front of like all of his siblings. He has like 5 or 6 younger siblings. His older siblings are like taken away from him because they're half fae. And then his like mom's, like his whole family's dead. He has one uncle. The uncle starts to slowly lose his mind. So in order to keep
heartbreaking,
in order to keep everybody together, Julian at age like 12, maybe, he was young, starts running the entire like institute in secret. While his writes letters to everything. It's basically he's running like a government like sanctuary pretty much in his like world. Yeah. And it's nuts. And they say like throughout the 3 books that feature Julian Blackthorn, like he's devious, like no one wants to be his enemy. He will do anything for his family and for Emma, this girl that he's in love with. And he really does scare some of the other characters by the things that he's willing to do and the lies that he's willing to tell. Like he will get the job done. And I love Julian Blackthorn. We love a tortured, 6 foot tall, brown haired, artist. He's a painter. We love it. And he lives in this like cliffside mansion in California on the beach. Like we love Julian Blackthorne.
It's funny that you bring that up because like he'll do anything for the people that he loves. And I guess like that's an ongoing thing with the morally gray characters. But in my rewatch, it's Rebecca Michelson is going through that. And she goes, why? I mean, you can't not say that. But she's like, everybody's hating on Rebecca. I mean, and Rebecca's a bitch.
She's
like,
so
right?
annoying sometimes.
She's so annoying, right? And then, but we're at this. I'm at the end of season. We're approaching Silas territory right now, and she calls Stefan out on it. She goes, "You are giving me a hard time. You want to protect Elena." Blah blah blah, and she goes,
"I was protecting Elena.
I will always protect Elena." But she goes, you're mad at me and you're holding me to this standard, but you all are doing the same exact thing that I did for my family and the people that I love. But it's just, I love somebody different. Like, I'm not here to protect Elena. I'm here to protect my family. She's like, you all are doing the same exact thing. And I thought that was, I complete, again, since it's my first rewatch, I forgot that point. You know, because you're, you know, as the watcher, you're typically watching it like, yeah, protect Elena, protect Damon, like keep baby Gilbert alive. All, you know, your team Mystic Falls in this moment, and you forget it's exactly the same exact thing, just with different familial branches. And you're like, oh, Rebecca, you are so right now. You know, if you're watching it objectively.
Well, what's the saying? Every villain is the hero of their own story. And I think that could absolutely be true when you apply that to morally gray characters too, because they are doing everything for their own like burning reason, right? So they're the hero in their own eyes. I think you have to kind of function that way.
And the hero is their villain.
Exactly. A series that Jess hasn't read or seen is Game of Thrones. There's a lot of it. It's tragic. We know this. I have read Game of Thrones. I've watched Game of Thrones. I read all four Game of Thrones books over Christmas break one year, and then just like a week and a half, and then I read book 5 when it came out. Very familiar. My husband is also very familiar. Lots of morally gray characters in that story. Lots of villains. Lots of really terrible people. I'll just say Tyrion, and I'll say Dany, because that's all I'm gonna go. That's as deep as I'm gonna go on it.
Okay, my question is, and it could be applied to Game of Thrones or morally gray characters as a whole. Does there need to be good in all of their choices? Like a reason?
In their choices or like in their heart? In their intention. Their goal.
Their intention. Because, I mean, it's not like my intention was to mass murder people.
Right. Okay.
But if the mass murder was a means to an end for the greater good, you know, like Aelin. If you think about Aelin, she killed all those people.
She's definitely a mass murderer.
She's a mass murderer. She's her comfort mass murderer. But it was like when she went to am I thinking of Queen of Shadows, where it was like her, Adian, and they were going to that first temple where like they decimate everybody in 10 minutes or something. And then they spend the other 10 minutes cleaning up, where she's talking to the king in spirit. Oh my God. I sound like a crazy person.
Oh. Holy shit. That's Empire of Storms. That's
okay.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Continue. The fuck?
There were all those people that she killed.
Yeah.
But with intention. Like, she killed those people for the greater good, to not have like them so they can continue on with their journey and their progress, and like nobody else was getting attacked.
Right. And you could also say that Aelin also like murders people, and they are like freed, right? Like from the Volg or whatever, right? So,
right.
I mean, like, so yes, she's murdering all these people, but these people are like begging to die. So I don't know. Aelin's a really good one. Do you consider her morally gray?
I didn't till this conversation. She's my hero. I love her so much. I have her on this pedestal and everything she does is with reason. But I guess she could be considered a morally gray protagonist. But you never, it's hard because you never discuss how a protagonist is morally gray if we're breaking it down this way.
Right. I think it's pretty easy to see Magneto as morally gray. It's really hard not to sympathize with like his cause and his horrible, tragic backstory. Nobody likes Nazis, but it gets sticky. You got Venom on here. And then, Jess, did you ever finish reading The Bridge Kingdom?
No, I didn't even start. I started the first chapter and I think another book came out at the same time. And then I just it's downloaded on my Audible. I have both books, I think, too. I think there was just a special going that it was included with the Audible 1 week. So I downloaded them really quick before they were.
I mean, they're fine. I mean, they're nothing to like write home about. But is Laura in there? Is she a morally great character? Maybe. Maybe. I think she kind of ticks all the boxes. But the thing about ticking all the boxes is that you can kind of make anyone fit, right?
That's the thing. And I feel like you can even apply that to us as humans, not just characters in a book. Because if we go with these definitions, technically, we are all morally gray. We all have some tragic backstory. It might just not be portrayed as sexy as some of these other characters.
No, and that's really fair. So if we flip that, who is a character that is like morally upstanding? Like, can you think of one like right off the bat? Like somebody who's just...
I just finished watching the Falcon Winter Soldier, so I'm already like thinking Steve Rogers. That's literally the only character, and that's the whole discussion with the current Captain America, John Walker, is he's not upstanding.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Upstanding. Or then Superman, like before regular old normal Superman before any like plot stuff happens to Superman.
Like Clark Kent and Smallville?
Sure.
Then I don't consider him morally gray. I just felt
he's like
he was
upstanding, right? Like
right.
He'd be an upstanding. I'm trying to think of like upstanding characters that people can't like argue with.
There's no denial.
Yeah. Okay. So we have two. I can't think of a lot of other ones. Even like good characters that. No, Literary Libra did a good TikTok speaking out on how she really is annoyed by morally gray characters, their circle of friends. Do you know what I mean? And like, I haven't seen this one. There's always one. You sent it to me. There's always one person in the circle of friends that doubts and is a roadblock to our morally gray like character, but our morally gray character is loyal to that person.
Oh, she's talking about was it this with one of her feedback with reading Six of Crows duology, right?
Yeah, it was Six of Crows, and it was also like the comments were talking about like Kale and just people that are
fucking Kale.
Yeah, people that are always in the way, and if you would just step back, then everything would be solved. But your moral hand-wringing has gotten us caught or something.
It's funny. This is totally not relatable, but it's so every time I was reading Kale, I was like, fucking Matt Donovan. And now that I'm watching Matt Donovan, I'm like, fucking Kale. Like, can you stop already? They're literally the same person.
Oh, well, Matt Donovan's a good example of that. Right? Like,
but see, I think you can question it because he uses vampire blood when it's convenient for him. Like, do something, use your blood. Aren't you able to save people? Like, he likes to think that he's Mr. Captain America, Mr. Morally like sound. No, it's when it's convenient for him. And that's what I've taken away so far in 4 seasons.
Yeah, he's boring, isn't he? Good, Matt Donovan. So I was thinking about like TV shows that have morally gray characters, and I couldn't really get a lot of actual TV shows.
Like outside of fantasy?
No, just in general, just off the top of my head, like stuff that I really love that I could easily identify. I really couldn't think of, but I did find stuff for movies. It was just like Riddick and the Chronicles of Riddick. Basically everybody in Starship Troopers, Blade from Blade. Quentin Tarantino does morally gray really well, and then John Constantine from movies and TV and comics. We love Constantine. So those are my like movie examples, but there's a million more, but I wasn't going to sit here and like list them all. Also, for a little plug, we have Dune. There's kind of a section on that website that we mentioned earlier about the fandoms and tropes. What's it called again, Jess?
tvtropes.org.
tvtropes.org. They're talking about the difference between black and gray morality. And black morality is like just evil. And then gray morality is basically what we're talking about. And they mentioned Dune, and I love Dune. It's one of my favorite kind of sci-fi fantasy novels. And yeah, I understand the problems with it, but I'm really excited about the new movie coming out with Timothée Chalamet. And I really love the old movie that is just really terrible with Patrick Stewart. But they are saying that Paul and Jessica are, gray and or black morality because they manipulate the hell out of a complete religious system to make themselves and like set themselves up as prophets, more or less.
I mean,
that's not a good thing.
No, I know. Here I am like justifying like, but in certain circumstances, doesn't manipulation like...
And yes, maybe it was fated. I mean, I'm not going to get into it, destiny. There's all sorts of things, but just like looking at it like right on its head, it's not a good thing to take advantage of religion and set you up as saints. Oh my God, the Road to El Dorado. That's the whole plot of the Road to El Dorado. I remember that.
Oh, that's right. Because I only saw that movie once.
Should watch it as an adult. It's very sexual.
I feel like that's the case with a lot. Like if I just went through the entire Disney Plus archives, I'd be like, what, how did I? But obviously you don't see certain things, but there's that. I think we had that discussion of that shift into quote unquote, like adulthood of when you start agreeing with King Triton before and
I'm
you
16 years old. I'm not a child. Sit down. You are a child.
Want some land dick. That's all Ariel wants. To a guy she doesn't even know.
Yo, Eric is fine as hell, though.
Look, I love me a dark hair, light eye male. Don't
With
get
a
me
dog.
wrong.
He's got that dog. That's all I want in a man.
Max. Come on, Max.
We love him. Okay. Morally gray versus villains. Jess, why do we love them so much? Because we identify with them and we like, what? To see complex men struggle? What is it with us?
I feel like with the morally gray, there's still some goodness. Whereas a villain, that goodness is questioned. You're like, not even questioned. Typically, if you're 100% villain, there is no soul, there's no goodness. It is completely selfish. Whereas morally gray, that selfishness, it's extended to a select few.
Do you think that ties into the trope of, like women wanting to fix like a broken man? Are we throwing our feminism out the door?
You know what? Because the morally gray characters that we love, those males are not allowing the women to throw their feminism out the window. They are embracing it. They are putting these women on a pedestal to be like, embrace your feminism. I am your servant. Maybe that's part of what it is, like the morally gray character. Because the women with the characters that we like, they're not fixing them. They're all the same people. They're just kind of growing together and understanding each other's perspectives. Whereas the villain is just like tunnel vision. That's it. No other external thoughts, maybe, or people can impact why they think the way they do.
When you think of a morally gray character and then you think of like a villain and a completely good character, I personally think that morally gray characters communicate better. I feel like they communicate their thoughts and their feelings and their wants and their needs better than any of the other two. What do you think?
Yeah, because, well, even if it's reluctant to at some point during the character dynamics, it is revealed. It's not like they're going, and that's very relatable to real life too. We're not spilling everything. You know, there's a relationship grows, and that eventually, that communication is there, and understanding the character even more. Oh, I can't think of her name, but we've been sharing a lot of her stuff. We'll put it in the notes. There's a book talker, and she always she typically leans towards enemies to lovers, and she'll say, I have another oddly specific book trope. And in it, you know where it's going, and your heart is so full. But everything she says, you're like, yes, that's another reason why I love that morally gray character, because there's the caring is there, the vulnerability is there, the communication is there. And I think that probably the communication also ties into that vulnerability, because they're allowing themselves that moment of weakness. And I think we all kind of want to have somebody who's willing to show a softer side of them than the external force we kind of present to the public.
Where would you put Castile?
Oh, morally gray, not even a question.
Okay.
I mean, he's can I be like, if there's a polyamorous relationship to be in, him, Castile, Azrael, Reese, let me have my own little reverse harem there, right? But like is it in the first book? No, maybe it's like right at the second book, Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, where they're eating dinner and somebody says something snarky to Poppy, and Castile literally rips his heart out, and he goes, now everybody else knows, don't fuck with this person. And then later in the book, he goes, she's my wife. You might want to take a step back. I cannot wait for that third book. And now I'm worried, what if we're hyping this third book? We're recording this episode in April, so this and being aired in June. So the book will already be out. What if we've just built this hype and it falls flat? I've read some other books of hers and I'm not thrilled. So I'm worried.
Don't jinx it. Fingers crossed, right?
Yeah.
Fingers. I have to. Was it arms, fingers, and legs crossed?
Toes, everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Don't do Castile dirty.
No, we can't have nice things. Okay, so if Castile's morally gray, so then would you consider Cardan morally gray then?
I don't know what he did that would hold on, let me go back to our list of 4 things. I mean, it's weird. What did he have motive for? I mean, we know his background, we know his weakness, we know he had choices, but what was the thing that was motive to do something bad? I don't see him. What did he do that was...
He was cruel, right? Like
that's the cruel prince.
Yeah. He like tortured, you know, he was his like bad self for all those reasons that we learned, right? Like we learned all of his backstory.
But I don't consider... he was cruel. But I feel like there's a difference between being cruel and mean, maybe.
Okay, this is really interesting. So then, if we're using all of these kind of labels, I'm going to say parameters, and I'm sure my editor Sam is going to go, "Oh, that's not the right word," and he's going to be so pissed.
He's going to be walking out like, "That's not what you guys are." Like, he's going to be so frustrated.
He's going to be so mad at us. But using all of these kind of qualifiers that we have, so is Cardan just like not damaged enough? Is he not like violent enough? Because he says like his redeeming quality is that he isn't a killer. He does all the other stuff, but he doesn't kill people. So do you have to like kill people to be morally gray?
Oh, with all the people we talked about so far.
Oh, they're all mass murderers because this is the day, this is the time and the place and the age. We like mass murderers.
I don't know. Because Cardan he's the cruel prince. He's a bully. But that doesn't mean all bullies are morally gray either.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Just because you're a bully doesn't.
But I'm looking at this list, and these people have murdered people. I can't. Okay. I've got Jay Gatsby from The Great Gatsby on here. I cannot remember if he specifically murders the old man or what exactly happens. So please let us know. But he's the only one on our list that I can't exclusively say, like, yes, he's murdered at least 3 people.
I want to know. I think it'll be fun to hear whoever's listening to this episode, because this is not like a fandom in a way. I would love to hear what other people, what they would consider morally gray characters or not, who we've mentioned. They're like, well, I kind of disagree with that. Just like how you have that blogger list saying, like, Joe from You is morally, to me, no, absolutely not. He is not morally gray. It really would be interesting to hear other people's insights. And especially if you I'm thinking of Kat. Writing is my passion is her Instagram and her TikTok. I think she does a lot of the femme male character cosplays, and I feel like she has a good insight of the people that she portrays, because she loves a morally gray character.
Oh, that would be exciting.
But I feel like there's more people out there who can contribute to that. Like, oh, you didn't mention this person, or you didn't mention this person.
Somebody that we haven't mentioned is Tia from The Bone Witch. I'm halfway through The Bone Witch. I haven't finished it. I know it's a series. I'm in it, but I can already see how she is a morally gray character. So I'm about that. I'm aware of that. I'm working on it.
Do you think morally gray characters have to be distinguished as such right out the gate, or could be in development? Because you said you're halfway through and you haven't made up your mind about her.
I think it's clear where she's going to go. You can kind of see that she, when the path diverges, she doesn't take the all-American Captain America goody two-shoes path. She takes the path that's kind of sus. And, I respect a character that takes the sus path. I like that. It is what it is.
Is it sus, or is it just not safe?
Sus.
Okay.
It's sus. Because it's not the immediately like right thing to do. It is self-serving. Okay. And yeah. And that's another thing though. Like, I think a morally gray character has to be slightly self-serving.
Makes sense. Cause then otherwise it wouldn't be morally gray.
Yeah.
It would be selfless.
Yeah. Cause if you're evil, you're murdering people for like a goal. But if you're morally gray and you're murdering people, it's to like,
it's still for a goal, but the goal is different.
It's different. It's for like money, or it's for like something, I don't know. I feel like morally gray characters are not on the same scale as like villains, because villains usually have like a I'm going to blow up the world kind of thing. And morally gray characters are like, I'm just going to murder these people because, there's revenge involved. I'm not going to blow up the planet. You know what I mean? Although, if you have to think about it, what's the difference between a villain and a supervillain? I know there's a lot. There's like whole series about that.
Is it the scale of which they villainize? I don't know if that's a word.
Well, like Dr. Horrible's sing-along with Neil Patrick Harris and Felicia Day and Nathan Fillion, like that he's trying to get, into like the
supervillain club.
Yeah, and like Harley tries to get in.
I was going to say Harley was trying to get to the League of Assassins.
Yeah.
And then when she's in,
she doesn't want to be there. Yeah. So like that is a whole like trope in and of itself, like a regular villain trying to like make the step up into supervillain. So I think that's interesting that like within villains, there is a hierarchy. I love that.
It's just weird to think that we could all live in a kumbaya. Like as much as we love like equality, think of even when there's a group project at like its basic foundation, there needs to be a leader. Otherwise, who's going to wrangle everybody in?
Oh God, no, group projects are terrible. We hate group projects. Oh my God, just let me do the whole thing. Just let me do the whole thing. I'll put your name on it and that's the end of it. Like, please no.
You know what? I just don't like my grade relying on somebody else's lack of motivation.
So Jess, I know we're just about to like close this up, but I'm looking at one of these definitions that I have, and it said, if you're looking at something about shades of gray, characters who know that they have a bad side or a habit or some trait that is characteristically wrong and they fight against it are part of the reasons why we love morally gray characters. So if you're using that definition, would somebody with like a detrimental habit, like smoking or like drug use or something like that, would that make somebody a morally gray character if you're going solely by like our qualifiers here?
But it's just smoking or substance abuse, does that count morally gray? Like that to me,
I don't know. I'm asked that. I don't know.
I don't know if that feels...
It doesn't feel right, right?
No.
Like it feels wrong.
If those are the examples, no.
Okay. It was just something that just caught my eye. I was like,
Oh, I had a question just because the trailer came out recently. Loki, everybody's crazy for him, but is he a villain or is he an anti-hero? Because he doesn't feel morally gray because nothing he did, like, it just, this conversation reminded me of Tom Hiddleston's representation of Loki. And this is just like, I know how much you love Thor Ragnarok, and you obviously love a morally gray character. So I wanted to get your insight on that.
I think Loki's morally gray. I think he kind of dips into anti-hero territory. I don't think that he is ever a villain. I think in all instances where you could consider him like a big bad, there was a reason, like somebody above him that was kind of pulling the strings. Like he was never kind of in charge on his own. I love him. I can't wait for his show. I think that if we're looking at our four things, that Loki has motive, he has weakness, he has background, and he makes hard, like crappy choices. Thor says he betrays him like constantly. So, yeah, I think he can fit into a morally gray category easily, but that he can flow through a bunch of different ones. And that is in league with his character. I'm good. All my points are made. Just tell me about what is next.
So this episode will be airing on May 17th, which puts us at next week's episode will be Shadow and Bones Netflix comparison. It's a month from the release of the show. We're going to be discussing things we liked, things we didn't like. I mean, you probably know it was a struggle for us to read the trilogy, but not so much the duology. So feel free to follow us, join the discussion. Follow us on everything too. We've had some really fun mile markers lately, and we're doing giveaways and just interacting more. You can follow us at ACOFAE Podcast on Instagram, ACOFAE, and on TikTok, we're both ACOFAE Laura and ACOFAE Jessica.
And thanks so much for listening to us. Make sure to interact. As Jess said, we love y'all. Y'all are the best. And I can't wait for everything in the future.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening.